Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone out to the Dublin Linux Developer Meetup. This month we've got Piotr and Kunal from Amazon Web Services. Peter, let me turn the time over to you.
Absolutely. Hi, Neil. Hi, everyone. I'm solutions architect in AWS in Dublin, and I've been with the company for the last 6 years. My background is in networking and Linux, and that's how I started my journey with queuing, shaping the network traffic with HTTP and CBQ and using the masquerade, etc. in Debian. That was the only solution to do it that days, about 20 years ago. And then I started to use Ubuntu as well, and CentOS, Fedora, Red Hat, and at some point that doesn't make any difference what Linux you're using, as long as you've got the functionality that you need. What you should see.
Just before you do that, Peter, I'd just like to take a quick minute to introduce myself. Everyone on the call. I'm Kunal, and I'm also a solutions architect working with Peter, based out of the Dublin team. I've been working with AWS for nearly 5 years now, and I have my expertise in big data and analytics. Really happy to be joining this call today and looking forward to the session. Thank you.
So the demo that we're going to present today is about Cloud Shell, the tool that allows you or enables you to run commands for free, and you can execute any API call, for example, and control your AWS resources directly from browser, and that's very convenient. And another part will be the Cloud9, and it's the IDE where you've got much more control, and you can also develop your code and have the fully functional Linux operating system without any management overheads. And we will also show how to run CloudFormation templates, so basically deploy multiple resources along with security groups and different virtual machines that we call EC2 instances in auto-scaling groups, which means that if any of them goes down for any reason, or there are any connectivity issues, etc., they will just spin up automatically other ones and handle the traffic. Also, the database deployment within that stack. And we will show how to do it simply using the CloudFormation templates. So basically, if I can share my screen, I would like to show the quick diagram of what we're going to deploy. And that will be the Elastic Load Balancer that will handle the traffic between the two availability zones within California region. I picked it up quite randomly, really. And then we've got the web server that will serve the WordPress traffic in each availability zone, and they will communicate with MySQL database that can be deployed as the multi-AZ setup with synchronous multi-AZ standby, or without. And I'll show you how to control that very easily. So let's just kick this off. So what we have, we can use Cloud9 obviously both to take a look into the code and the CloudFormation template, and also run that template. Before we start, I'd like to show where we took it from. So we've got AWS sample solutions with plenty of those sample templates, and this is just one of them. So we've got the WordPress scalable and durable, and that says that you can set it the WordPress website in auto-scaling group with multi-AZ Amazon RDS database, and that's exactly what we're doing. So if we view quickly the CloudFormation template, this is what we're going to deploy. And the process is very simple. So basically, copy that link, go to your Cloud9, and just run wget. So you get this. I already downloaded it before. And then just run that stack. What it means is that the AWS command is part of the AWS CLI that is installed already on this Cloud9 environment. And then the AWS CloudFormation means that we want to do something with CloudFormation. And in this particular case, we will be creating a stack. And then we put all of the necessary parameters like stack name and template body of the file that we've just downloaded, and all of the parameters. So I will just start deployment of that. We've got stack ID. And if we go to a CloudFormation console and click refresh, I filter it by demo because I called this stack Linux meetup demo CloudFormation Stack. We can see that it's already started. We can get in and take a look into events, and we will see all of the events that are created. So now I think it's time to hand over to Kunal so he can explain in detail how those tools work. And then we will come back and we will continue to look what's been created and what we can do about it.
Absolutely. Thanks for the introduction, Peter. All right, so you heard Peter talk about a lot of things, a lot of too many keywords, I'd say. So we'll try to make it easier for you. I'll run through the various technologies that we're going to present in the demo. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview of these services. So I named the presentation Linux Developers Toolkit because essentially it'll be some handy tools for you guys as Linux developers. So what am I going to cover today? Well, I'm going to talk about Cloud Shell, Cloud9, and CloudFormation. Then we'll get back to demo. We'll see if the resources have spun up as part of the stack that Peter deployed. And then at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. So what is Cloud Shell? As Linux developers, I'm sure you guys have worked a lot with the shell, to kind of interact with different services. And that's the exact functionality that AWS Cloud Shell provides. But the advantage is that you get all this functionality via a browser, and the shell is actually running in the cloud. So it's the easiest way to get started with AWS CLI. Now, when we talk about AWS, there are various ways that you can interact with the cloud. One would be the traditional way of kind of going into the browser and through the management console. The other one would be the CLI. Third one would be the SDKs. Fourth, and perhaps that's limited to only some of the services, and that would be with JDBC and ODBC connectors. So Cloud Shell, when you launch your AWS console through the browser, this is the landing screen that you will see. This is where you kind of search for the services. And just here next to the search bar is where you can launch the Cloud Shell from. You click this tiny button and it basically launches the shell for you in the browser. And guess what? You don't have to set up anything. The permissions are all set up for you based on the credentials that you use to log into the browser. The same credentials will be used in this shell. Most of the AWS CLIs and packages are already installed and ready to go for you. So basically, it's a very neat and easy way to launch the shell and interact with all the AWS services. So this just kind of summarizes what I just talked about. It's an easy way to communicate using the CLI. It makes it very, very easy for you. You just click at a click of a button, you have the shell available to you running in the cloud, no packages to install whatsoever. And then, you can explore the various services. You get persistent storage for about 1 GB of data in your home folder, and it's just a one click away for you. Again, this summarizes what I already said. The permissions that this shell will use will be the same corresponding to the user who logged into the AWS console. So again, there's very little management that's required to set this whole thing up. All right, that was a little bit about Cloud Shell. Now I'm going to talk about Cloud9. So basically, you saw Peter earlier launch the CloudFormation Stack, which is nothing but just infrastructure as a code. He basically launched that from an IDE that was running in the cloud. And that's what AWS Cloud9 provides, right? It's just an IDE running on the browser. Again, we're trying to make it easier for you to kind of spin up the IDE in the cloud without having to set that up on your local machines, installing the various packages. And imagine this is only the setup you require for one project. If you're working on multiple different projects for multiple different languages, there's a lot of effort that you have to kind of put in to set that environment in your machine. And multiply that with the number of developers working on the project, and you can potentially be saving a lot of man hours, so to say, by just using the IDE on the cloud with the browser. So this is how it looks like, right? So you launch the IDE. The IDE basically runs on top of a Linux machine. This Linux machine can be launched as part of Cloud9, or you can have an existing machine and you can instruct Cloud9 to kind of use the existing machine, Linux machine that's already running as part of your environment. So on the left, you have basically your directory structure or your project structure. This is where you get the space to kind of author your code. And here at the bottom, you have access to the terminal. So you can imagine, if you're writing a Python code, as in this screenshot, I can write this Python code, and then I have access to the terminal where I can test this code if it's working as expected. And then once I'm kind of satisfied that it's working according to what I've written, then I can push this code to the likes of GitHub or AWS offerings such as AWS Code Commit. It has those integrations in place. I know you guys must be having some questions. Please put them in the chats. And at the end of this session, we will try and get to everybody through the questions. Okay. So just to summarize, what's Cloud9? Again, it's a cloud-based IDE, makes your life a whole lot easier. You can use a managed EC2 instance, which is a virtual machine. You can ask Cloud9 to spin that up for you, or you can use any existing one and basically have Cloud9 use that. Another very nifty feature of Cloud9 is what's known as pair programming. So imagine myself and Peter working on the same project, different parts of the same code. And what we can do is we can invite another programmer to the IDE, and we can basically work on the same code in real time. So the changes that the other developers are making, they will be visible to me. And you have the option of chat as well. So you can imagine this can be really, really powerful in terms of collaboration with the other developers in your team. And it's something which customers really like. The other thing is many times where IDEs lack is that they don't really have much functionalities for the serverless side of things. But with Cloud9, you get a lot of functionalities when it comes to serverless. You get access to SAM, which is like the AWS way of managing serverless applications. You get access to, you can push the code to AWS Lambda, which is like a serverless compute offering from AWS. So, it has those integrations, not just with the server-based kind of applications, but also with serverless. And that's where Cloud9 really shines. And then, as you saw in the screenshot earlier, it also has terminal access. All right. So on to the last piece, which is CloudFormation. So we talked about Cloud Shell, which basically helps you spin up a shell easily in the cloud environment and really interact with the different AWS services. Then we talked a little bit about Cloud9, which is just an IDE in the cloud. And then now we're going to talk about CloudFormation, wherein you can manage all of your infrastructure using just a template or like a piece of code, so to say, right? And when can this be handy? Imagine that there's a company, for argument's sake, we'll take a delivery company, right? And this delivery company started off based in Ireland, and they've become really, really successful in the last few years. And they want to replicate the same business across various different regions within Europe and probably Northern America, God knows where. So this is where CloudFormation comes into the picture. You know, it's a single source of truth. You can basically define all of your infrastructure as code, deploy it in one region. When you decide to expand to another region, you know, you can use the same piece of code to deploy into different regions. And you're basically looking at spinning up infrastructure in different regions in a matter of minutes, you know, and it's all very consistent across your regions. And because you're using the same template, you can be sure that you're not over provisioning. You have taken scalability into account, high availability into account, security, you know, all the good stuff that the cloud can provide. All that can be taken care of as part of the template. And that template is easily usable, so to say, in different regions. So these would be the kind of highlights of CloudFormation. It's declarative and flexible, transparent, integration ready, and the other important thing about it is it's absolutely free. So any sort of template that you design in CloudFormation to basically describe your infrastructure, there's no charge to create the templates and to store the templates. But naturally, if you deploy that template, which in turn deploys the underlying resources, do pay for the resources that it launches. It's again reiterating the fact that it's a very simplified way to create and manage your resources, and not just create, but also update resources. Again, it provides a very easy way to even make changes to your infrastructure and kind of roll back to the last good state. So those kind of functionalities are also available to you. Again, you can interact with it through the management console, or you can use the AWS CLI, or you can even use the various AWS APIs available to you. And you saw Peter launch this CloudFormation Stack via CLI commands running in Cloud9 terminal, right? So again, it's really, really powerful, really makes your life easier if you maintain that kind of a stack and have the template ready. And you only pay for the resources that you launch. No need to pay for CloudFormation templates and its storage. So this is how it looks like, right? You have your template. It will typically be in YAML or JSON format. These are the only two formats supported as of today. So in using one of these two formats, you kind of describe all of your infrastructure, and then you save that template on in S3 bucket, so to say. So S3 bucket, you can think of it as blob storage for people who are not very familiar with AWS environment. And you use that template from S3 and deploy it using CLI or APIs or just the management console. And what it does is it creates what's known as a stack. So you can think of stack as a collection of resources that you describe in your template. So all of those templates can be deployed as in spun up and spun down as one unit. And that's what is very powerful. If you're deploying something for testing, and once you've done the testing or some experiments, you can just bring down the template or the stack, and it basically terminates all the resources that you launched as part of the stack. So really helps you experiment, so to say. Present templates to the AWS CloudFormation. And what CloudFormation basically does in the background is whatever configuration you provide as part of the template, it converts that into actual API calls that it makes to launch the resources. And all the APIs are basically run in parallel. So if you decide about 100 or more resources, they're not being launched sequentially, they're being launched parallelly. So you can imagine it will take less amount of time to spin up the infrastructure. But if there are dependencies, you want one resource to launch first, and only then should you launch the second resource, then you can manage the dependencies and relationships as well in the CloudFormation stack. But by default, they're launched, all the resources are launched in parallel. So yeah, this is one of the offering for infrastructure as a code, and the service lets you roll back to the last good state. And you can replicate, redeploy, and repurpose your stacks. All right, so I talked about the two formats that it supports, first one being JSON and the other one being YAML. And these are some of the just the templates for your purview, so in CloudFormation syntax, you can use YAML or JSON, and this is just an example of a YAML template. This has the various parameters that you can specify as part of the stack, and in the next slides, we will see what are the kind of parameters you can use, which ones are necessary, and which ones are optional. Okay, so I'm just going to skip that because this is just the same thing that I've already talked about. One important thing here is that you can also deploy what's known as nested stacks. So when I say nested stacks, you can deploy a stack, and that stack can deploy another stack. And that's what's known as a nested stack. Now, why would you want to do that? There are many cases where you want to have one stack which you want to manage independently, but the whole of the infrastructure, you want to be able to spin that up using a single stack. So that's where, nested stacks can be really, really powerful. Now, some of you may never have worked with CloudFormation, and that's where CloudFormation Designer comes in really, really handy. On the left-hand side in the Designer, you have the list of various AWS services, and you can basically drag and drop the services in this little Designer. And what that does is, corresponding to the resources, it will create the template for you that you can go in and edit, provide the configurations, and just use the functionality of the template without having to kind of write down each and everything. So it just makes the life of a developer much more easier. Okay, so this is the template autonomy. There are various sections within the template. As you can see, first one is the template version, which is just a fixed value, really. And that basically tells CloudFormation what version of the template it is. In the sense, right now, we only support one version, but in the future, if the service was to evolve and we were to add more kind of feature sets, we will basically release a new version of the template. And if you provide that new version date, the template will be interpreted in a different way. But as of today, if you were to provide this parameter, you would provide the fixed value that's there in the documentation. Then we have a section called description, where you talk about what this template actually does. Metadata is kind of similar to description, but it makes, you can be more verbose with the metadata in the sense, not just what the whole template does, but if you're talking about virtual machines or EC2 instances, what is the purpose of them? If you have databases, what's the purpose of them? So, you can describe more granularly in the metadata section. We have we have other sections for parameters, mapping, condition, transform, resource, and output. Out of all of these parameters, the only necessary parameter that you have to provide is resources. And this is where you actually provide what resources to launch. Whether it's virtual machines or security groups or any of those things, this is where you kind of provide those details. Everything else is optional. Okay, so this is just going to reiterate what I said. You have the format version, you have the description, and then you have the metadata. Now, this is an interesting part of the template, which is known as parameters. So within parameters, you can provide certain things that you want as input for launching the stack. It could be that you want to create an S3 bucket, which is just a blob storage in AWS. And if you want the user to provide the name for that blob storage or bucket, so to say, so you can, within the template, you can say S3 name parameter and ask the user for the name to be provided for the bucket. Imagine if you're launching a database, for example, and then in that case, you can have the user input what is the name of the username you want to create and what is the password that you want to create for that user. So again, anything that you need as input from the user, that's something that you provide in the parameter section of the code. You saw Peter deploy the stack and he did provide some of the parameters. We can discuss that when we hand back over to Peter, but essentially you can provide him some values that it takes as inputs and uses them to deploy the resources. Then you can also use what's known as intrinsic functions. And with intrinsic functions, you can really use the power of CloudFormation templates, and you can deploy one template into various different regions, so to say. So if you don't want to hard code in which availability zone shall I create my resource, right? And availability zone, for all of you who don't know, it's just part of the region. So within region, you will have various availability zones. And as users, you can choose which availability zone you want to spin the resources in. So if you don't want to hard code which availability zone you want to launch the resources in, because probably you want to use the same template in various different regions, and within the regions, the AZ names will be different. In that case, what you can use this intrinsic function called get AZs. So get AZs will return the list of availability zones. And then from that, you can do what's known as fn select to just select one of the values that you get as output. And using that, you can deploy the resources in that particular availability zone. Then we have a section for outputs. Outputs can also be really, really handy in the way you'll see in the lab when we launch a web server, for example. You really want the user to get some output in terms of what is the link to the web server, or if I installed some virtual machines, what is the IP for the virtual machines. So in those kind of scenarios, output can be really, really handy. In the interest of time, I will quickly run through I will skip some of the things which are not really necessary. AWS CloudFormation change set is also a really powerful feature. So I talked about the fact that CloudFormation can be used to deploy resources, as well as you can make changes to the resources. So if you launch resources in auto scaling group, and if you want to change, let's say, the max size of auto scaling, you can do that by just making changes to the CloudFormation stack and deploying that stack. And what change set basically does is, once you've provided the updated CloudFormation stack, it kind of gives you an overview of what will actually happen in the background to make that change. Whether some resources will be spun down and spun up again with the new configuration, or is the configuration such that you can make changes to the existing resources. So that kind of information is provided to you using change sets. And then this is nested text stacks that I talked about. So if you want to install various different stacks as part of the whole main one stack, this is provides you the functionality for that. And then you can cross-reference stacks. So if you want the output from one of the stacks as an input to the other stack, those kind of functionalities are also available. Then I suppose one of the last features here that I'd love to talk about is about stack sets. Stack sets is a really powerful feature wherein if you have various different accounts in various different regions and you want to spin up the same kind of resources in different regions and different accounts, you can use stack sets. And as you can see through this little diagram, I deploy something here and automatically, because I'm using the stack set functionality, it is deploying the same resources in different regions, in different accounts. Again, can be really, really powerful thing for the developers. And that brings me to the end for the presentation. Please continue to put your questions in the chat, and I will get back to you during the end. Over to you, Peter.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kunal. And please just confirm that you can see my screen with the stack creation complete.
Yes, we can.
Yes, I can.
That's great. Okay, so because we had plenty of time and that stack didn't need that much time to spin up, there was a couple of resources and database, etc. But we can take a quick look how much time it actually took. So the database, for example, which would be the most time-consuming resource to create here, took about 7 minutes, right? So from 1:15 until 6:22. So that's around 7 minutes to create the resource that would require the most time. But let's see what we've got in the outputs. Okay, we've got the website URL. That means that our stack created already something that we can use. So let's try that and see if that works. Okay, that works. That's good news. We can just fill it in quickly. We can discourage search engines from indexing this site just for now, because we don't think that's going to be a production website. Okay, so let's log in. And it works. Okay, so it means that the whole stack was deployed successfully and all of the resources are deployed successfully, which is good. And we can take a look what we have here. So we've got an address of the load balancer. So if we take a look into this diagram, we can see that all of the requests go through the Elastic Load Balancer, and this is exactly the address that we can see here. Now, if we take a look into the template itself and search for the load balancer, for example, we'll obviously see all of those resources, and we've got the listeners here and target groups, and I will show you what it all means in the console. So we've got 2 machines deployed to WordPress web servers deployed, and with purpose we use the small type of instances, so it's cost optimal. In the meantime, I logged in to those machines. Okay, so I tail the logs of the Apache server and see what is going on here, so we can see how the requests are handled by the servers. Now we can also take a look into load balancers, and just to confirm that the address that we've got in here is the address of the load balancer. Okay, so that's the one. That's good. We can take a look into our listeners, and we've got the listener on port 80, very easy to change or add the 443 into this. And then we've got something that is called target groups. And in our target groups, we should see the two servers that are running. And we've got the demo target group and Linux target. So let's just take a look into this one. Yeah, so we've got the total targets of 2 machines, and they are the machines that we've deployed. Okay. All right. So that's what we've got. What we can test now quickly is just we've got the session open here, and let's take a look what is happening on those servers. So we've got plenty of requests coming from the load balancer itself, right? So the load balancer needs to know that those machines are operational. So it's sending the request, the health checks every so often, and we can change that time if we want to. But let's see if we just refresh the website and which server responds. Okay. All right. Okay, so it's clear the one on the left is handling those requests now with the sticky sessions. And we know that it's 24185. Let's come back here and see which one it is. 24185, right? So we know that this machine, this virtual machine, the EC2 instance, that's the one that is handling those requests at the moment. Let's just kill it. Okay, so we terminate that instance and let's see what happens. So one instance is shutting down, so it's not operational anymore. Obviously, I was kicked off because this server is not there anymore. We've got just one running. So let's come back here and refresh and see what happens. Okay, that works, right? So that's good news. So basically, the other servers started to handle those requests. And this is exactly what we expected. This is what we expect the load balancer to handle. So if anything like this happens, if that machine goes down from any reason, we've got another machine running and handling those requests, which is good. Now, if we come back here and check what is going on, we already see that another machine is in a pending state. So our auto-scaling group already is spinning up a new server, and it's already running now. And we can log into that and see. So instead of this one, we can close it now. That's not needed anymore. We can log into this one that is new. Okay, that's not running yet. It takes a little bit of time for it to come up and to be added to the load balancer, etc. But anyway, I think that we're on time at the moment, so let's not wait for this machine to come up. Obviously, it's running. It'll be added to the load balancer, and it'll be handling the request along with the other one. So that would be the end of the presentation and our demo. Hopefully that was something useful to learn about the Cloud9 and the Cloud Shell as well. and CloudFormation, obviously. And if there are any questions, let us know.
I see we have some questions in the chat. Okay, someone in the audience has asked us, the first question is, can I share something in Cloud9 with someone in a different AWS account? So as of today, if you want to do pair programming, the various users that need to collaborate, they need to be part of the same AWS account. But I suppose there can be workarounds done to kind of overcome this limitation. So the answer is no, but there can be some workarounds we can work with. The second question is, how much is Cloud9? You can go through the documentation, but essentially you don't really pay anything for Cloud9. You only pay for the underlying virtual machine that's running, and that's hosting the IDE for you. We see another question on how do you unprovision something with CloudFormation? Peter, would you like to take that one?
Absolutely. That's a very good question, and I can very quickly show that. I think that will be the easiest. So if you're using the CLI, that's one command, and that's actually a very good question. I think it's worth mentioning here. So let me just quickly share the screen again and talk a little bit about it. So because that our WordPress website is not very precious at the moment, so we can just delete it. We can just delete the whole stack, right? So one command, delete the whole stack. And now, if we don't have something that is called the deletion protection on the database, that's something that can be a little bit painful. So obviously we should have the snapshots of the database, etc. But also usually it's very good idea to put this one little flag in CloudFormation template that is saying there is a deletion protection true, which means that if you run that, the whole stack will be deleted, but your database will be left alone and will be just running without any problem. But that one command, that's it. So what is happening now? The whole stack, if we take a look into our CloudFormation, that's the one. Delete in progress, and the whole stack will be deleted along with the database in this specific situation. So obviously this is done with purpose. In samples, we want customers to be able to test and to experiment without additional costs. So if there is a quick check, if that WordPress is going to work, etc., that's easy. You can delete that stack and any cost, so that there will be no additional cost for running that instance in the background or anything like this. The whole stack will be deleted within minutes.
Yeah, and I think that's a very useful feature which many of the customers use. And that's typically true for the databases or the likes of S3 buckets, where the customers would generally store a lot of data. And in that case, you want to make a very informed decision before you spin down those resources. And yes, this particular flag can be really useful in terms of retaining those resources and not deleting them as part of the stack. And then you can go into the console and make an informed decision and spin those resources down if you like.
So, first off, I want to say thank you very much. It's been really interesting. Both of you on a bit of a monologue, but it was well worth it for me anyway. Therefore, I hope it was worth it for you. So I just want to clarify something that I think I got right. So if I've got a CloudFormation stack, or I've got a stack created and running, and I want to change the number of servers on the load balance or something like that, I can do that on the live stack just by putting an update. I don't have to collapse it and start again, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. And that's what I talked about in the change set, actually, at the end of my presentation. So if you want to make some changes, you can update the stack, make that changes into the various parameters and configuration, and deploy that again. And as part of the change set, it will basically let you know that what is the kind of change it is. Is it the kind of change wherein the resources will have to be, spun down and spun up again based on the new configuration, or is that something that can be changed on the fly?
So if I had a web API running in a Docker Nginx, and don't know where I'd need that again now. I've not played with load balancers before. And I wanted to actually update the code I'm running. Is that a change to deploy a new Docker interface? I'm not quite sure how that works.
So that would be a different service. That would be ECS probably, or Fargate. So ECS is like an elastic container service where you can run your Docker containers. You can run them also in EKS, which is the Elastic Kubernetes service. And for both of them, you can do multiple different things. You can use them along with services like AppRunner or Proton, where you've got a lot of possibilities of how you want to control those deployments, along with the blue-green deployments and the very specific way of how you want them to be deployed. Or even more important, probably, how you want to spin down the ones that you don't want anymore. So there would be a couple of different ways to do that, from DNS configuration and switching between different stacks. Yeah, definitely ECS and EKS for Docker. You can run them on directly on the EC2 machines. You can run them in Fargate, so completely serverless. You don't have to worry about any machines running those containers. You just want to make sure that the container itself is running properly, and that's where Fargate is really useful.
Just learned something new. Thank you. Actually, I learned a few things new with that answer, but the last one in particular, have to look into that.
So this examples that you gave today were very basic examples for just virtual machines and running directly on EC2 virtual machines, which we call instances. And in this situation, you can. I've got another set because I knew that there may be some questions, so I had a couple of them running, and this one is the one that I didn't delete. So I can show the update that you asked for. So basically, in the CloudFormation, you just click update, and you can change all of the parameters that you've got specified in your CloudFormation stack or the template as parameters, right? So if you've got it there, you can just click and change the number and run this update on the stack, right? That's update in progress. And within minutes, we will see that the number of instances will be changing. So we've got the California 1, 2 that I created before. So nothing is happening just yet. We can take a look into CloudFormation again. And the web server group is the changes in progress. Let's just wait a minute. Yeah, and I think that worth mentioning here is what we have in the init configuration, the launch configuration of those instances, of those virtual machines. This is a part of the CloudFormation template where you can specify the bootstrapping techniques and flow of what is happening after the instance is launched. And this is where the WordPress is installed, and this is where all of those things are happening, including the change of the ownership or the rights on a certain catalogs and files and things like that. Right. So this is a part, the install of a WordPress itself with the certain version of PHP and Apache and things like that. So this is what is specified within that.
So if I was running bespoke programs, I configure them in there to be fired up when the instance spun up.
Absolutely. And you can do multiple things. You can copy the code from S3 into a certain folder before the instance starts running. So your application is ready to go. And as soon as it's added to the load balancer, it's ready to handle requests.
And since we're talking about virtual servers and all of these things, another thing that you can basically do is you can create a virtual machine, install the packages that you require for the application. Steve, you mentioned about a bespoke application. So you can make sure that everything is installed in the machine. And then what you can do is you can create what's known as a golden image out of that machine. And then you can reuse that machine for every machine that's launched. And in that case, spinning up the machines will be much faster because the image itself has everything pre-installed.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. So now we've got the 3 machines running of the based on a configuration that we've just updated in a stack. Now let me just log in again because I've got a timeout there. Okay, so we can obviously change that back into whatever amount of machines we want to be running. Let's say 1 is the maximum here, because that's the maximum that we want to be running. We can specify, for example, minimum of 1 and maximum of 5. And if there is no load, we will be having just 1 machine running. If the load comes, there will be more and more of those machines spin up automatically within that auto-scaling group. So depending on the configuration, you can do different things. And obviously, that's the whole idea of the auto-scaling, right? To run the minimum number of resources so you don't have to pay for them. And then if there is a requirement to run more, they will just spin up automatically. Okay, so that's the update complete now, and we should see 2 of them being terminated within a minute or 2.
And just on that, there's another nifty configuration here. When as part of the auto scaling group, when the resources are being spun down, you actually you can actually also configure which machine should be spun down, whether it should be the first one or the last one, so everything, so to say, is configurable. So this is what makes all these services really, really powerful. The developers have all the control with just few configurations. So yeah, that's also one of the key features.
Yeah, so we didn't dive deep into what's possible there, but obviously you can control how you scale. So based on any metric that you want, like CPU usage, for example, above 60% of the CPU usage of the certain instance within a certain autoscaling group, more of these instances will be running to bring that CPU lower than 60%. And let's say, you can specify a very different metric, saying if there is a number of requests higher than X, you will be running more, etc. Right? Yeah. And obviously within the thresholds that you're interested in, which is, for example, the maximum of 10 machines, let's say.
So if I was being nice and cheap about it and didn't want multiple servers running, but did want protection from my server going down, I'd just run this with a maximum and minimum of 1.
Absolutely, yes. Exactly.
If that dies, it comes back like you showed us.
Yeah.
It's just there's a gap in the service between it going down and coming back up.
That's correct.
And now that you mention it, Steve, I'd like to add one more thing here. So if you or any of the people on the call or anybody really, if they sign up for AWS, you get, as part of the free tier, access to a lot of AWS services. Yeah. So you can basically experiment with a lot of services without having to pay anything because they're covered as part of the free tier. So again, something very useful for you and other people on the call if they want to, get their hands dirty and really experiment with AWS.
Yeah. Well, it's also a safer way to get started.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And we're here to help. If you want to reach out to us on LinkedIn or something, we're more than happy to help.
And I thank you very, very much for coming and doing this. Also, it's brilliant.
No problem at all. Thank you for having us. And unless there are any other questions, that's probably time to wrap up.
Thank you very much. Thank you.